This afternoon on Soul Train, we are going to be looking at the Baha'i Faith. It's one that I really don't know much about, except I do know someone who is of the Baha'i Faith and she doesn't drink. And we'll find out possibly why that is. Theresa Ashford, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mary Lou. Thank you.
So how did you find out about the Baha'i Faith?
Oh, that's a great question. And I was thinking about that as I was driving down here. I think for me, the Baha'i Faith crossed my path a number of times. I was at an international conference in Istanbul, the City Summit, and I was representing a sustainability NGO from Canada, and right across from me was a Baha'i Faith stand. And I remember going over there and reading the literature, going, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. And then just letting it go. And about 5 years later, it was my sister-in-law who said, oh, have you checked out the Baha'i Faith? And I said, I'd never heard of it. And so history rolls on, and I've been a Baha'i for about 11 years now.
What was it about the Baha'i Faith that appealed to you?
I think for me, I always had a very strong sense of spirituality and a deep love for God. I grew up in an Anglican family and within that, field of Christianity, and I think as a lot of people do, you start to question your own religion and your own beliefs. And I started to look at Christianity and the idea that some people were right and other people were wrong and some people would go to hell. And those kind of dichotomies didn't work for me. And I've been really fortunate to travel. So I've been to Buddhist countries and Islamic countries, and I felt that their spirituality was real. And so I guess in reconciling that, I kind of pulled back from my own faith and, interestingly enough, came across the Baha'i Faith. And one of the main tenets of the Baha'i Faith is that all religions are one. So as a Baha'i, I believe in Muhammad. And as a Baha'i, I believe in the Buddha. And as a Baha'i, I believe in Krishna and Jesus. So I believe all of these are manifestations of God. Mm-hmm. And they come from the same God. There's only one God. And so if you look at it, because I actually found there's way more similarities, and you've probably found that as you're speaking to all of these people from different faiths, that the essence of their faith and their belief and practice are very similar. And I think just through me thinking about that, so I came to that realization on my own. And then when I was presented to the Baha'i Faith and started to study it. At first, I have to be honest, I thought, oh, this is very logical. It seems like a philosophy. It's not real. So the divinity in the faith didn't hit me right, immediately. And I think the interesting thing, I think when you talk to people about faith, some people come upon it really quickly. And then others, they kind of it grows slowly within them. And I think we have a lot of heart-mind exchanges. And for me, my exchange was my mind. The Baha'i Faith made total sense. And it was my heart, the idea that this is a new faith, because I wasn't searching for a new faith. I was searching to be reconfirmed and understand my own Christian faith in a better way. And that wasn't reconciling itself. So I think it was hard for me. But the idea that now I'm a Baha'i and I can still love Jesus and I still love Christianity and I love that practice and I have deep respect for it. I feel that I haven't turned my back on that faith. I have a new perspective on it.
Is there one Baha'i book, if you like, like the Bible or the Torah or something like that? Is there one book that people follow?
Yes, we have a holy book, the most holy book, Kitab-i Aqdas. And I guess for a lot of people who are not familiar with the Baha'i Faith, the prophet of the Baha'i Faith is from Persian. And his name is Baha'u'llah, which in Persian translates to English as the glory of God. And he's contemporary, so it's a very new religion. And it's a religion that, if you look at statistics, if you're interested in statistics, it's one of the most widely spread out religions. It's found in every part of the globe. And what's interesting about that, there's no schism. So there's no different types of Baha'is. Mm-hmm. So if you visit a Baha'i in Dublin, or you visit a Baha'i like myself, my home in Sunshine Coast in Australia, or somewhere in Africa, we would have the same practices and the same belief in Baha'u'llah. So that's interesting, I think. So we do have a holy book, the Kitab-i-Aqdas, and we have lots of writings. And what's interesting is the writings are all produced in the hand of the manifestation of God. So
what does that mean?
That means they were written by Baha'u'llah. So the prophet of our faith has written our holy book. Okay. So what, as you know, in previous religious dispensations, Jesus actually didn't write the Bible, but they are, what I believe in the Bible as being a holy book and accurate, but they weren't written in the hand of Jesus.
You've said that Baha'i is a contemporary religion.
So 1844 is the beginnings of the Baha'i Faith. And that's another interesting, I don't know if you've done any just religious history. 1844 is an interesting time globally as a great time of religious expectation. So there was a lot of Christian sects at that time who were waiting for Jesus to return. At the same time, there are a number of Islamic groups who were also waiting for the ninth Qiyam, I think is the name. So they were waiting in anticipation of this new teacher. At that time, the Baha'i Faith was declared in Persia in 1844 by somebody called the Bab. And that sounds kind of strange.
The Bab.
Bab. Once again, that's a Persian word, and it means the gate. So it's lovely. Yeah. And so we have something called twin manifestations. So we have the Bab, who is the gate, and the Baha'u'llah, who is the glory of God. So if you're familiar, and probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with John the Baptist, who traveled the country preparing people for the coming of Christ. In the same sense, the Bab was preparing people for the coming of Baha'u'llah. Yeah, so that's 1844, and then 1860 is when Baha'u'llah, I believe it's 1860, around that time period that Baha'u'llah declared his mission as a prophet from God.
How did he go about finding followers for what he believed in?
Yeah, it was very difficult because, as you can imagine, it's never been popular to say that you're a new prophet from God, especially when you have systems in there that are not prepared to change. So when you look at the Baha'i Faith, where our systems are, for instance, one of the tenets of the Baha'i Faith is equality between men and women. So we can imagine at that time period that would not be a popular thing to be declaring. Another thing that would be not popular at the time is the idea that we are responsible for our own spiritual progress. So that's why I'm sitting here just as a regular person who is a Baha'i, rather than we don't have any clergy.
Really?
So immediately what happens is a whole group of people whose way of life is ministering to people, which I'm not saying that's the wrong way to be. Within the Baha'i Faith, we don't have that function. So that would not be also popular. So Baha'u'llah, if you read his writings, even if you don't believe in who he is, they're beautiful and talk about unity and love. The teachings are very simple. It's about love, kindness, and unity.
But at the time, that didn't go down too
But
well.
at the time, that doesn't go down very well. And what they say is Baha'u'llah, from the point that he declared himself, he was in prison or exiled his entire life. His final days were spent in Akka, which were a prison in Israel, and then he was then released from the prison, and his probably last 9 years of his life was in a location just outside of Akka, and he had followers. So it's actually a miracle that there are any Baha'is, considering there was a huge effort to squash out this new faith. But I think people can hear the purity and were waiting for a new message. The first believers of the Baha'i Faith were obviously from an Islamic background, but Christians, even from North America, were made aware of Baha'u'llah and made pilgrimages to Israel in the end to come and see him. So the faith, despite all what we would think material constraints to its growth, has actually become 180 years later, a worldwide faith.
You've said there are no ministers, there are no clergy. So how is the word spread about the Baha'i faith?
Yeah, and we're also not allowed to proselytize. So that's probably why lots of people don't know about the Baha'i Faith. So we're not allowed to walk around and knock on doors or, other more vocal ways of sharing the faith. We are allowed to, if we're invited, to talk about the faith. So if you know somebody. For instance, I teach Baha'i classes at a local school here in the Sunshine Coast. That's because my kids were there, so I was allowed to deliver a Baha'i program. And so I described what the program was about, and then people could opt in and choose to send their kids. I think Baha'is are trying to... It's a difficult process. When one of our central tenets is independent investigation of truth. So we don't believe in indoctrination or telling people what to do. But at the same time, we need to be ready and available to people who ask. So I think it's an interesting balance.
And what about a service? I'm thinking, a church service or a meditation or a get-together or whatever that happens in other faith-based organisations. What do Baha'is do? Do you have a regular day where you get together?
Yes, we have something called a 19-day feast. So every 19 days we have what people would think of as a church service. So we get together and we pray and we have devotions. And then we consult, and it's a very democratic religion. So I, for instance, am on something called the Local Spiritual Assembly, and we're voted onto this assembly of 9 every year. And so any issues that are going on, the entire community is open to that period of consultation about what's going on. And then we have something called social period. So then we eat and enjoy each other's companies. But we do have activities that everybody is invited to. So we hold devotions. So I come very strongly from the peace movement. Is where a lot of my efforts were in. So I would have devotions for peace, and I think that's an important part of my life still, is thinking about peace, and it fits very well with the Baha'i Faith. We have study circles. So as Baha'is, we can invite our friends if they would like to come and study. I'm actually working with a study circle right now, and we're working on a book called Reflections of the Life of the Spirit. So that's a lovely book, and we sit down, and it's a different process. It's not, we would never convey that this is the truth. We would look at these writings and have people think about, how does this occur in our lives? Because Baha'is, as you've mentioned, have slightly different practices. For instance, Baha'is don't drink. Baha'is are discouraged from what we call back talk, or talking about people. What is that called here?
Gossip.
Gossip, thank you very much. Goodness, I'm going to sound like a Puritan. Oh, what is this thing we call gossip? Anyway, you know what I mean, gossip. So we try to discourage or not become a part of that kind of those activities, because we find that they're negative. And we try to only engage in positive practices. I mean, not that drinking is a negative practice, because a lot of people can drink. And this is, I'm the only person who doesn't drink of all of my friends. But I don't drink because I think I'm going to go out and do something negative to people. But I think the Baha'i Faith looks at the human race as one. So we have to look at how does my practice, everybody doing it. And with drinking, I think what we find is it often negatively impacts the least empowered in societies. And it has negative impacts. I know it's had negative impacts on some of my friends. So if it's not a positive practice, we try to just stay away from it. But we don't judge people who drink. I mean, we believe everybody's on their own path and can make their own decision. I've just come to that, and I think that's what's right for myself, right for my family.
Is Baha'i an ever-evolving faith?
No, we believe in something called progressive revelation, which has that sense of evolution in it as society evolves. We believe society is progressively becoming more peaceful and more unified. We believe that there will be peace on the planet. So some people believe, we'll never have peace. Baha'is strongly believe in our practice and our daily lives that we'll find a space on the world, that we will be peaceful with each other. We believe that Baha'u'llah is not the last prophet. We believe God is always with us and will never leave us without guidance. And so I guess another explanation would be, as you move away from the purity of the original word, 2,000 years later, and some of these faiths, 4,000 years later, we're trying to work with very old words, and we use our own kind of human tendencies to mold and shape them. So in that same sense of Chinese whispers, by the end, it becomes not as accurate as it was in the beginning. We, believe in that, God would probably send another, will send another prophet when it is time.
I'm just wondering, because you embrace all religions,
yeah,
that's what I've heard you say. So if new religions come into being, is that something that the Baha'i Faith then as a whole would have to look at and see how you would embrace that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I don't think for Baha'is, we actually believe that Bahá'í Faith is the newest faith in that string of faiths that we're talking about in terms of one religion, one God. We believe that there will be a new prophet probably within 1,000 years. I think within contemporary times, we don't believe that new faiths will pop up every 20 years.
Okay.
We believe that if you read the writings for the Baha'i Faith, that they have a contemporary but long-lasting teaching and wisdom to them. So, in 1,000 years or sometime in the future, long time in the future, we will need to be recorrected. And the nuances in terms of the advancement. So we believe in, if you're interested in Buddhism, where we have these noble truths, as a Baha'i, we see there's great wisdom in those noble truths, where suffering comes from and how we control our sense of suffering and our connection to suffering. If we look at the Christian, Jesus teaching about loving your neighbor, but loving your enemy, that's a very difficult quest. Moving into a more contemporary time period where we're asked that we should not even engage in back-talking. We need to advance our practice in such a way.
And having embraced all these different points of view from different religions, what do Baha'i think about the hereafter, if you like? What happens after we die? Is there an opinion there, or is it just left open?
No. The Baha'i Faith speaks strongly about the hereafter, and that our purpose in this life is actually setting us up for what happens after we die. So for here, we're in an interesting period of free will, where we can choose if there is a God or not. We can choose how to practice our lives. We can choose how to prioritize what we do. So it's all about our choice. Some choices in a Baha'i sense are more virtuous than others. And our virtues are the things in a Baha'i perspective, and what my understanding of a Baha'i perspective, those are the virtues that we take with us to the next life. So Baha'is don't believe in evil per se. Like, we don't say there's a devil or there's evil, but we believe there's an absence of good. Mm-hmm. So when we pass on, we only take what is good with us.
Oh, nice.
So it's that, well, it could be nice if you have some good to take with you.
I'm just thinking, if you embrace all religions, some believe in reincarnation, some don't.
Yeah, we actually see those as actually being a similar vision. And we don't believe in reincarnation back into this planet, into this space. We believe that we are reborn again in a new world. And we believe there's many worlds of God. So that's an interesting idea. And so if you're interested in quantum physics, which Baha'is believe there needs to be a clear understanding of science and religion, and that they actually support and should be thought of as two wings of a bird. We need to have both of them. Quantum physics talks about parallel realities or many worlds, which is interesting. So our sense is in reincarnation and becoming close to nirvana, we believe that we have our spiritual life is, as far as we can understand, eternal, constantly moving towards our Creator. So we leave this world and we are in our next world and we are closer to our Creator, but we still have progress towards the Creator. So we don't just stop progressing. So it's not like, okay, you finished, you've crossed the line, and this is where you're going to be for the rest of eternity. It's eternity is progression towards God or the Creator.
We have been talking about the Bahá'í Faith. Theresa Ashford with me in the studio. If people want to find out more about the Baha'i faith for themselves, perhaps they're interested in meeting someone from the Baha'i faith, what's the best way for them to go about it?
Well, Baha'is have a national and international website. On actually the National Australian website, it will have links to connections to all the different areas. So there'd be a Sunshine Coast, I believe, email that they could connect through. And so that's just Baha'i.org. And I think the Australian website would be Baha'i.org.au.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's supported by the Australian National Spiritual Assembly. Those websites are great because they actually give you, very clear information about what we are as Baha'is interested and actively working in, and the principles of the faith, and give you access to some of the writings of the faith.
A good place to start.
Yeah, I think that would be a good place to start.
It's been wonderful to find out more about the Baha'i faith.